Hello. It is true. I have embarked on this subject called Saints and Liars, but I am not here in that capacity. I was asked to speak about the challenges of Holocaust education at the university, and that will be our focus now. Now, it's a bit of a chutzpah for me to speak about the challenges. First of all, can everyone hear me? Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you. So as I say, it's a bit of a chutzpah for me to speak about the challenges of university education about the Holocaust. Serving as I do as founding director of the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University, my experience is about success rather than problems. Yet I realize that the undergraduate and doctoral programs that we have developed reflect a singularly happy institutional story, and our very successes, in fact, illuminate the structural problems in academia generally. And so I will balance my presentation between a discussion of the challenges and a reflection upon the path we forged at Clark. And to give you a complete roadmap, I will focus on practical institutional issues and then move to the human resources side of the equation. Let's look at the big picture. Let's set Holocaust history into the frame of academia. As recently as 10 or 15 years ago, there was no formal subfield of Holocaust history. I myself hold the first full-time, fully endowed, chaired professorship in Holocaust history in the United States. And the PhD program that we run at Clark specifically in Holocaust history is the first of its kind. So why? The question is, why did it take so long for the history of the Holocaust to be recognized as a legitimate, let alone significant area of scholarly research and teaching? The most obvious reason is that the Holocaust is a recent event. 75 years ago, the Jews of Europe had not yet been murdered. The Holocaust had not yet begun. And it takes time for current events to move into the realm of history. Then, too, European historians and Jewish studies scholars were sincerely baffled by where Holocaust history should be. European historians simply assumed, without much critical thought, and I believe incorrectly, that the history of the Holocaust fell within the domain of Jewish studies, while the Jewish studies professors felt, quite rightly, I believe, that the Holocaust was a European phenomenon and properly fell within the realm of European history. At a certain point, however, the Holocaust was not quite so recent, and these questions about domain, where should this fit, could have been addressed and could have been resolved, but that did not happen. It did not happen 50 years ago or even 20. And here we move from the challenge, where does Holocaust history belong on the academic map? What department is responsible for fighting with the university administration for faculty positions? So we move from that to the underlying ideology that structured these practical problems. I'll use an example to illustrate. In the early 1990s, the University of Pennsylvania concluded a search to fill the Meyerhoff Chair in Modern Jewish History. The position was offered to a scholar whose area of expertise was social history, European Jewish social history during the Holocaust. In other words, life. The department was unanimous in its support. The dean was delighted. But the chair of the Jewish Studies program went to the wall against this appointment. The history of the Holocaust is not a central concern of modern Jewish history, he proclaimed. And he went on to say that if the incumbent of that professorship were a scholar of the Holocaust, it would give a negative image of Jews to Jewish and non-Jewish students alike. He won that academic dogfight. And that is the essence of denial. Polite denial, but denial nevertheless. Imagine if the position had been in German history and it had been offered to a scholar of the final solution, and the Germanists had opposed it because the appointment would give a negative image of Germans to German students and non-German students alike. I don't think so. In my view, our failure to demand the same degree of scholarly training in the subfield of Holocaust history as in any other subfield of history constitutes polite denial. Many colleges and universities offer at least one course on Holocaust history, and anyone can teach it. No special scholarship is required. In other words, while we expect an American historian with expertise in the 19th century, if not the Civil War itself, to teach a course on the history of the Civil War, any professor willing to do so is considered competent to teach the history of the Holocaust. Similarly, while every director of every major art museum, and follow me on this one, and the great majority of curators have a PhD in art history or even in a subfield of art history, no director of any Holocaust museum or memorial has comparable formal education in Holocaust history. Ditto the curators. This challenge to university education holds even here in Israel. I stand here on the mothership, Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem, with its rich collections, passionately engaged staff, renowned scholars. Still, Yad Vashem, like the USHMM or any other memorial museum, is not a university, is not a degree-granting institution. And I genuinely wonder, where is the equivalent of the Strassler Center here in Israel? Recently, 3 such proposals for a center were put forward to the government, to the Israeli Ministry of Education. And I understand that none of those 3 proposals made it through the first round. I know nothing more. And so I sit with my question: why is there no such center at the Hebrew University right here in Jerusalem, or Ben Gurion, or Tel Aviv, or Haifa? I leave that question hanging as we move from structural institutional challenges and the ideological positions that frame those difficulties to human resources. Education, after all, is about human beings. Teachers have teaching preferences, and students have subject matter preferences. And from what we at the Strassler Center observe, classroom teaching practices in the US reveal certain biases in Holocaust education. American educators, mandated or urged by the state to teach the complex subject of Holocaust history, often turn to uplifting narratives like passages from the Diary of Anne Frank or accounts of rescue or survival. Thus, life-affirming messages are privileged while the murderous nature of genocide is obscured. Then, too, a trend toward deploying the Holocaust to convey moral instruction about present-day prejudices, human rights abuses, and current genocides has emerged. And these pedagogical problems raise important questions. What are the goals of Holocaust education? What is its purpose? Should education about the Holocaust include lessons about human rights? Now, this situation has yielded an unanticipated result at the university level. University students enroll in Holocaust history courses expecting to discuss prejudices, bullying, or ethical problems. They are amazed to find that they must learn a body of historical knowledge, that there is, in fact, a history to be understood, and that scholars have developed explanatory theories which they must analyze critically. Let me be clear, it's not that Holocaust history courses are more difficult than the students expected, it's just that they are different than the students expected. They expect ethics courses, and in fact, they're getting history classes. Educational institutions reflect the intellectual agendas and pedagogical philosophies of their founders. And my position as a champion of historical analysis, rather than history as a vehicle for moral instruction, frames the way we at the Strassler Center have shaped our undergraduate and graduate programs. Our goal was to develop interdisciplinary programs, to be sure, but with history as the backbone. At the same time, during the past 15 years since I was invited to Clark, the skylines of many cities have changed with the erection of a major monument, museum, or memorial dedicated to the Holocaust. Yet the aim of those monuments and museums may be somewhat different from our goals at the Strassler Center. As analyst Sam Schulman, who writes regularly for commentary in the Wall Street Journal, observed, Holocaust education was to be a gift from the Jewish community to the world at large. European Jewry was destroyed, but its legacy would be redemptive, a redemptive technique that was intended to prevent the future genocides of others. Kofi Annan held a similar view. Holocaust education, he maintained in an eloquent New York Times op-ed, is a vital mechanism for teaching students to value democracy and human rights and encouraging them to oppose racism and promote tolerance in their own societies. The role of Holocaust education, in short, whether through classroom education or museums or films, is specifically to foster the notion of minority rights, to develop good citizenship values and practices, to promote tolerance. Now, these are valiant aims. These are aims that I support wholeheartedly and embrace warmly. Yet, praiseworthy as they are not at the core of our mandate at the Strassler Center. The undergraduate and doctoral education we offer does not aim to shape students' behaviors. It seeks to explore and lay bare underlying social processes and political, bureaucratic, and economic structures. Our view is that we may not be able to alter how human beings wish to act, but we may well be able to alter the conditions that prompt those wishes or allow them to be actualized. And that would be good enough. Indeed, that would be great. Let me return to Kofi Annan's editorial to pose another set of questions. Why is it the job of the Holocaust to teach about democracy and human rights? Why do we shoulder the Holocaust with that responsibility? Why not task the history of the Enlightenment with that function? One last point about students' expectations as a challenge to university education. Students come to us imbued with ideas about remembering the Holocaust, but they really don't know what it is they wish to memorialize. That's one challenge. And then there's another challenge, and that's the politics of memory. Memory and history are not identical. Indeed, memory making is about myth making, and that is not the historian's business. As always, an example to illustrate my point. Focusing specifically on Europe, the University of Konstanz professor Elida Asman references historian Dan Diener's observation that the Holocaust had become the paradigmatic European lieu de mémoire. And she identifies the International Task Force as a key step to institutionalize this common memory as the core of European identity. What she seeks, she says, is, and I quote, not a master narrative, nor a common history textbook, but a generally agreed upon frame of reference to communicate and negotiate conflicting memories. As a historian, I query a generally agreed upon frame of reference to communicate and negotiate conflicting memories? Is the point of historical analysis to support the political goal of a harmonious European Union? Let me move on. The last challenge I will address is the role of genocide studies. In his final communication before this conference, the warm and wonderful Ephraim Kay emphasized the precarious place of Holocaust education today. The title of this conference, Telling the Story, Teaching the Core, expresses the worry, as Ephraim put it, the core is presently being forgotten and eclipsed by other narratives. And in his talk, Alvin Rosenfeld has elaborated that idea. I see this situation slightly differently. In my view, Holocaust history education is enriched by study of other genocides. A few examples from my doctoral students' work will show how this works on the ground, as it were. So, scrutinizing the dynamics of a borderland society, doctoral candidate Raz Siegel analyzes the persecution and destruction of sub-Carpathian Rus Jews. His lens, the impact of external political and military processes on intergroup relations. And he shows that both Jews and Carpatho-Ruthenians came under attack from the outside. He explores the way in which neighborly relations changed with shifting military, social, and political conditions as tens of thousands of the region's residents, Jews and non-Jews, faced increasingly harsh state measures. And thus, his research contributes to our understanding of a key issue: the precise nature and mechanisms of human behavior in acute crisis. If Raz had taken a narrower approach, if he had focused exclusively on the Jews, the underlying structures would have remained hidden. But situating the Holocaust in the broader picture of ethnic conflict and violence that gripped Eastern Europe during World War II, he locates the persecution and annihilation of Jews in Subcarpathian Rus in the context of plans by the Hungarian state that ruled the region since 1938 to create a Magyar majority by violent population transfers. And these schemes targeted Carpo-Ruthenians and Gypsies in addition to Jews. So stepping back allowed him to see Jews as one group in a multi-ethnic society. And thus, his work helps us understand multi-layered mass violence. Studying in the same, second and last example, studying in the same physical space offers the opportunity for cross-fertilization. Graduate student offices are in the top floor of the building we occupy, and the students share space. Thus, Stefan Ionescu, who researches the Romanization in his hometown of Bucharest, and Umit Kurt, who analyzes the Armenian genocide in his hometown of Aintab in Turkey, found they had much to discuss. A project of the Antonescu regime, Romanianization was an ideologically driven social engineering policy designed to create a new Romanian nationalist society. To create this ideal society, the architects of Romanianization envisioned the exclusion of foreigners, specifically Jews. Focusing on the southeastern Turkish city of Aintab, Umit analyzes the economic, political, and ideological motivations for support by local elites for the genocidal policies of the Union and Progress Party. And he shows that, contrary to official Turkish national historiography, local and provincial elites, driven by financial greed, willingly supported the cadres who carried out the genocide of the Armenians. They gained much. in wealth, in coin, property, and land. So sitting side by side, one working on the Holocaust in Romania, the other on the Armenian genocide in Turkey, they found that canonical images of Holocaust persecution, separation of women, children, and elderly from young and middle-aged men, murder of the latter, murderous forced marches of the former, all of those images characterize the history of Armenians in Aintab, not Bucharest Jews. The Holocaust paradigm applied to Turkey in the early 20th century, not the Romanian capital 30 years later. Yet, surprisingly similar underlying processes of depredation of property and the role and function of greed and social status emerged. Now, these comparisons are far from trivial, and studying each case illuminated the other. In each of these cases, then, all the studies that I have just mentioned, a broader lens or comparative analysis has enriched the students' research on the Holocaust. And so what I want not just to suggest, but to say from my experience is that far from eclipsing the history of the Holocaust, genocide studies at the doctoral level has added a wholly new perspective on that core story. And so I, a Holocaust historian, and I must say also their dissertation supervisor, I embrace these students' groundbreaking research. They and students like them are the future of our field.